Hey everyone, Nathan here, Absurd Being. Okay, we're in video 7 of this Phenomenology of Perception series, and we're in part 1, second part of what's going to be 6 parts. This is the second part, the experience of the body and classical psychology. So this video is going to be a little bit shorter. The chapter in the book is much shorter. So be it. That's cool. I'm okay with that. So let's get into it. The body. Merleau-Ponty gives us he starts this chapter by just describing some of the features or some of the characteristics of the body. And the first one is this idea that the body is a permanent object, or it is permanent for us. It's always there in our experience, as opposed to a classical object or a typical object, by which we mean something external to us, which can move away from us, which can disappear for us. The body is permanent in a way that those kind of objects aren't. So an external object, its presence, for it to be present, requires a possible absence. So that's one way of thinking about external objects. To be present, they have to also be at least able to be absent from us. Unlike our body is permanent in a way that in which it can't be absent for us. We have to have our bodies. We are our bodies. And even though he's describing the body as permanent, it's different from the permanence of an object. Were an external object, to be permanently before us. Imagine I don't know. Probably the closest thing we get is a smartphone. It's almost permanent. It's always there. But the body is permanent in a different way from that. The body is, he says, on the margins of all of my perceptions, as opposed to being in front of me. It's always there, kind of, not a little bit like in the background, but on the edge. It's never something before us, the way that, say, my smartphone is. Even if my smartphone is permanently in front of me, it's going to be permanent in a different way than my body is. And so this leads Merleau-Ponty to call the body a primordial habit. And that by that he means it's required for objects to appear. So again, this idea that the body is that through which, it's like the medium through which other objects can appear. He also calls this the primordial field of presence. What's interesting about this is that we can never know our body in this aspect as this primordial habit. So you can think about, a good example is the eye. And so Merleau-Ponty is saying we can never see our eye. But you might think, well, we can look in a mirror, right? And you can see the eye. How is that not kind of seeing the eye? Well, you can see the eye as an object, as an organ, as a physical organ, by looking in a mirror. But you can't see the eye as that through which vision takes place. You can't see the eye as a perceiving thing. You can see it as an object of perception when you look in the mirror, but you can't see it as the subject of perception, as the thing doing the looking. So whenever we look at the body, we always see this object. It's always reduced to just a thing. We never catch it as the primordial habit. And that's because in order to sense the body at all, we have to go through the body. We're using the body as the primordial habit. So we're just never able to close that circle and see ourselves as, see our bodies in this foundational role that they have for us. So that's the first point. The second point is bodies give us double sensations. And here he's talking about the way that if your hands, you bring your right and your left hand together and they touch, which one is the touching, which one is the touched? Which one's doing the touching, which one's being touched? There's this ambiguity between them. And that's, again, a point of distinction with other objects, so that the body can have this kind of dual, these dual aspects, dual experiences, and you can switch between the two. So I can imagine my right hand touching my left, but I can imagine my left hand touching my right as well, without moving my hands. So there's again this kind of ambiguous double sensation Merleau-Ponty is drawing our attention to. Another point of difference is that the body is an affective object. So it's capable of feeling, unlike any other objects that are represented for us. And he gives the example of having some pain in your foot. We don't say that my foot is causing me pain in the same way that, or as if we're describing a kind of a causal process here, as if, my body, my foot is an object and it's affecting me causally, creating the pain. We just say, I feel a pain in my foot. So there's no, the object, the body itself is capable of these feelings, these sensations, these affects, which again other objects obviously aren't. And the last point, the last characteristic of the body is what Merleau-Ponty calls kinesthetic sensations. And this is the way, referring to the way that moving an object, an external object, is different from the way that we move our bodies. We don't move our bodies the same way that we move objects. If I take this piece of paper and move it from one place to another, the way I approach this and the way I see it is that the piece of paper is here at one kind of objective place, and as I move it, it moves through space, and then it becomes located at a different point. When I move my body, though, that's not how we perceive things. It's not, I don't feel when I move my hand in the same direction, I don't feel like I've got this thing which is occupying a point in space and it's being relocated to another point. Of course you can describe it in that way, but that's not how we experience it. That's not how we that's not our original experience of moving the body. And Merleau-Ponty says that he describes this by saying we move our bodies directly. It's this immediate sensation. And he even says that the relation between my decision to move and my body moving is magical, in the sense that it happens, it's probably not 100% the right word, but it happens automatically. It happens without any thought. I don't move my body moves, or I move through my body, perhaps is another way to say it. So it's this really direct and kind of intimate relationship that we have with our bodies. So those are all some characteristics of the body. Interesting when you think about them and when you read them, but then if you think about them a little bit more, you think, well, this is just kind of obvious. This is basic stuff. There's nothing particularly earth-shattering about any of these realizations, any of these points. And that's what Merleau-Ponty says, actually, that psychology knows all of this. None of this is new, but psychologists have, again, he's talking principally about behaviorist psychologists, have gone into, or have even though they know these things, that they've adopted this impersonal scientific approach, which discounts these features of the body. It says, yes, we can, the body is this permanent thing. It's always there for us. It's not like another external object, but it's an external object and we can describe it like this. It's made up of these organs and the nerves connecting, blah, 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 muscles and tendons and all the rest of it. So it knows these features that make the body different from other objects, and yet it ignores those and focuses on the body as an object. It reduces the body to the status of the in itself, so that we don't have to worry about this, what it means that we can experience double sensations in the body, or why it feels different, why it feels so immediate. There's this magical relationship between our decision to move and our moving. Those are just kind of accidental or contingent features. Actually, what's really happening is your body is composed of these nerves, your brain's sending signals, blah, blah, blah. And so we just kind of skip over these features of the body. And Merleau-Ponty is saying we can't skip over that. If you skip over those, you miss what's essential about the body. You miss what's really interesting. You miss what tells us about our experience and our perception. So the living subject then gets reduced to an object, and the experience of the body, I like this, the experience of the body is reduced to a representation of the body. So again, we're taking a lived experience, how we actually use the body, how we experience the body, and we're discounting that and saying, wait a minute, what is the body though? Let's think about the body in physical terms. And we get a representation, we make an idea, a concept, and that's what we use to describe the body. That's how we then understand how the body moves and how it allows us to deal and engage with reality. So we understand it in this objective scientific aspect, missing again like what's really essential about the body. So we see it not as a phenomenon. That's the thing. So that's how we want to. That's Merleau-Ponty's whole project here, is to revive this, what he calls the phenomenon, the experience of our bodies, as opposed to just these psychical facts, these abstract ideas of what the body is. And it ends up taking those features above that we talked about. It treats them not as structural features of the body, but just as characteristics of the contents of consciousness that make up the representation of the body. So again, just that same idea reduces all of those features, not to something intrinsic or essential to the body, but as something just an interesting way that we think about the body. And then it goes on to abstractly define the body in physical terms, again bypassing those more essential aspects. So Merleau-Ponty asks then, what is the perceiving subject if the body is the way he describes it? If we take those features, those characteristics seriously, and if we don't bypass them, what do we get from the perceiving subject? What is the perceiving subject in that case? To be a consciousness, or rather to be an experience, is to have an inner communication with the world, the body, and others, to be with them rather than beside them. To concern oneself with psychology is necessarily to encounter, beneath the objective thought that moves among ready-made things, a primary opening onto things without which there could be no objective knowledge. This is a theme that I think is just going to be repeated ad nauseum throughout this series. We're describing this pre-objective field, this pre-objective way of understanding experience. And one thing that I did want to point out in that quote, the first line, to be a consciousness or to be an experience, I like that too. That's another way of thinking about what consciousness is. It's not this detached mind somehow dealing in abstract intellectual mental stuff, comprised of mental properties, whatever they may be. It's an experience. Fundamentally, that's what consciousness is. So to be an experience, to have an inner communication with the world, the body, and others, is to be with them rather than beside them. That's the other thing I wanted to draw your attention to. It means that we can't have this approach that sees us as just another object in the world, in a world full of objects. The relation that we have here is a deeper, more intimate connection than that. It's that living connection that we have, and that's mediated through this body, which isn't just a collection of flesh and bone and organs, and it's more essential to our experience, and that it's more fundamental to the way that to reality for us, to what the world is. It conditions them. It conditions it. It's that by which objective knowledge becomes possible in the first place. And so the whole idea here, we have to get back to experience. We have to get back to this phenomenon. And that's what we are in the midst of doing. Right, let's have a quick look at a summary. So first we looked at the characteristics of the body. And there are 5 that I'll point out. First, there was the permanence of the body, the way that it's always there and yet not in front of us like other objects, but always on the margins of all my perceptions. And this lets us see that the body is what we could call a primordial habit, the way that it's the original way that we interact with the world. And this is something we can never directly experience or directly know. Then we looked at those double sensations. Which hand is doing the touching, which hand is being touched. Affectivity, the way that the body is capable of feeling. We're able to feel with the body. And the kinesthetic sensations, the way that we move, how we move, and not reducing this process to like nerve stimulation, or signals being sent through nerves. Of course, that's what's happening at a physical level, but that's not our experience of the body. And that's what we're describing. That's what we're interested in here, is human experience, not a cataloging of physical processes. Then we talked about psychology a little bit, the way it reduces the living subject to an object. And this was a nice expression. The experience of the body is reduced to a representation of the body. So we're not dealing with our actual experience anymore, our lived, felt experience anymore. We're dealing with an abstract idea, a representation, an intellectualization that we're putting forth as the body. And in doing so, we're bypassing these more essential characteristics. And so the perceiving subject, what is the perceiving subject if the body is like this? Another way to think about this, what is consciousness or what is experience? These are all synonyms in the sense that we're using them here. And the perceiving subject has a primary opening onto things which is prior to objective knowledge, and which makes objective knowledge possible in the first place. And so that is kind of a description or a summary of where we're at in terms of the body. We'll continue along this same vein in the next video. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you shortly.